The Kepler 7 reactor station floated against the endless black of space, its lights burning like the veins of a living thing. The station's heart, its fusion reactor, pulsed with a low, thrumming hum that filled every corridor, every bulkhead, every breath. To Dr. Kale Chen, it was both a comfort and a warning. Tonight, that hum sounded different. Not louder, not softer, but off, like an instrument being tuned just slightly out of pitch. His radiation detectors clicked in staccato bursts, jittery. As if they, too, sensed that something was wrong. Kale stood before the control panels in the monitoring bay, his sharp dark eyes following the erratic spikes on the containment field display. 18 months on this station had made him intimately familiar with the rhythms of the reactor, but the recent fluctuations defied every algorithm he had run. The data suggested instability building in the magnetic containment field, a creeping chaos hidden beneath the steady surface of the plasma sphere that powered 3 entire star systems. His fingers drummed against the console, a habit born of nerves, though he forced his voice to remain calm. The soft hiss of the airlock doors opening drew his attention, and his pulse jumped despite himself. Zara Kefel stepped inside, her very presence shifting the energy in the room. She moved with a fluid grace that was almost unnatural, every motion measured and sure. The faint glow of her skin, tinted a pale, ethereal blue, was mesmerizing, but it was her armor that stole his breath every time. It wasn't just equipment. It was alive. The Zephrian biomechanical suit rippled with light and subtle movements, its patterns responding to her thoughts and emotions. Right now, the glow across its surface pulsed like waves of moonlight across a dark ocean. The harmonics are fluctuating again, Kale said without looking up from the screen. If this keeps up, we're heading for another surge. Zara's voice was soft and melodic, the kind of tone that made technical terms sound like poetry. "The reactor is restless," she murmured as she approached. Her fingertips brushed the panel beside him, and the armor interfaced with the station sensors, threads of alien energy weaving into the human systems. "Your containment algorithms are precise, but they are rigid. The fusion matrix isn't responding to calculations, it's responding to imbalance." "I can feel it," Kale snorted, though not unkindly. "Feel it?" "Zara, this is nuclear physics, not music." Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, and the bioluminescent patterns across her armor shifted in a swirl of amusement. "Energy flows are like melodies," she said, "and this one is souring." Before he could respond, the alarm screamed. The sudden, piercing wail tore through the bay, followed by the violent shudder of the station. Kale's monitors flared with red warnings as containment pressure surged. He grabbed the console edge to steady himself. Containment field spiking 30% over baseline. "We need to stabilize now." Zara was already moving, stepping closer to the emergency access console with a kind of focus that made his breath catch. Her armor flared, glowing brighter as its system sensed with the reactor's electromagnetic field. "Stay clear," she said, her tone sharp for once. "I'll bring it down." "Wait," Kale started, but she was already merging with the reactor systems, her body arching slightly as though she were channeling the storm itself. The lights in the bay dimmed as energy redirected through her, and the wild spikes on his monitors began to level out. Watching her was like watching someone dance on the edge of a cliff, beautiful, terrifying, and impossible to look away from. The armor's patterns shifted violently, flashing with streaks of deep crimson. It wasn't supposed to do that. Kale knew enough about Zephrian tech to recognize a warning when he saw one. "Zara, your armor's turning red," he said, alarm creeping into his voice. "What's happening?" She didn't answer immediately, her eyes closed, her breath measured. "It's just strain," she said finally, but he could hear the effort in her voice. Focus on the data, Kale. I need 30 more seconds. 30 seconds stretched into eternity. Kale watched the readings crawl back towards stability, but his gaze kept flicking to her, to the faint tremor in her hands and the rapid flicker of light across her chest plate. She looked like she was burning from the inside out. Then, with a sudden blinding flash, the alarms silenced. The readings leveled. The reactor's hum returned to its steady beat. Zara's armor dimmed to its usual soft glow, but not before Kale caught the faint tremor in her posture. She turned to him, her face calm but pale, the light of her armor slower now, like a pulse coming down from a sprint. "Reactor stabilized," she said, as though nothing had happened. But Kale wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, studying the faint bioluminescent flickers on her collar and arms. They were sharp, erratic, nothing like her usual flowing patterns. "You're hiding something," he said softly. "A normal interface doesn't do that." That red glow wasn't just strain, was it? Her gaze met his, steady but unreadable. "It's part of the job," she said. "Nothing you need to worry about." But he did worry. He couldn't help it. The look in her eyes, the exhaustion in her stance, it told him there were risks here that went far beyond anything he'd understood when this assignment began. And for the first time since arriving on Kepler 7, Kale Chen felt a ripple of fear, not for the reactor, but for the alien woman who stood between him and disaster. The hum of the reactor chamber lingered like a warning echo as Kale Chen stared at the containment readings that refused to settle. Even with Zara's intervention, the numbers danced restlessly across the display, like a storm crouching just beyond the horizon. It wasn't just the reactor that unsettled him, it was her. The way her armor had glowed red during the last surge wasn't normal, and he could tell from the flicker in her bioluminescent patterns that she was hiding something. Walked together along the narrow access corridor that wound around the reactor's core. The polished metal walls reflected Zara's soft glow, tracing fluid waves of light along the surface. Kale's hand brushed the cold railing as he followed, his mind caught between the sharp edges of fear and the warmth of unspoken feelings. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" he asked finally, his voice low but cutting through the steady hum of machinery. "Tell you what?" Zara replied without turning. Her tone was measured, calm, but too calm, like someone carefully balancing over a fault line. "That your armor nearly failed," he said, quickening his pace to walk beside her. "The way it flared red. I've read Zephrian technical protocols. That's a distress pattern." Zara glanced at him, the glow of her eyes reflecting faintly in the dim corridor. "You've been reading incomplete human translations of our systems. The armor's patterns mean many things." It was adjusting to the quantum interference, nothing more. "You're lying," Kale said, softer this time. "And I think you're doing it because you don't want me to know how close you were to dying in there." She stopped suddenly, turning to face him. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The low hum of the reactor filled the silence like a whispering heartbeat. "You think too much," she said finally, her lips curling into a faint, sad smile. "If I thought of death every time I interfaced with a reactor, I wouldn't be here." "That's not an answer," Kale pressed. "I've worked next to you for almost a year now. I can tell when something's wrong. I can see it in the way your patterns flicker." Zara looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to let the truth slip through her careful composure. Finally, she sighed and leaned against the cold metal wall. The faint glow from her armor reflected off the surface, painting her in pale blue light. "Zephrian energy specialists aren't supposed to live long," she admitted quietly. "The interface takes its toll. Every time I merge with the quantum core, my nervous system absorbs a little more of its chaos. We learn to live with it until we don't." The weight of her words settled like lead in Kale's chest. "How many times have you done this?" "Enough," she said simply. Enough that every time I step into that chamber, I know the odds might turn against me. He swallowed, forcing down the knot in his throat. And you're fine with that? You're just fine risking your life every day like it means nothing. Zara's expression softened, but her voice was steady. It's not about my life, Kale. It's about the millions of lives in the systems we power. Without this reactor, they go dark. No light, no heat, no survival. My people were trained to accept that one life is a fair price for many. But I don't accept that, Kale said, his voice sharp with frustration. I can't just watch you burn yourself out while I stand here and pretend it's okay. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her gaze locked on his, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. He wasn't sure if it was anger, sorrow, or something deeper. Before she could respond, the lights overhead flickered violently, and a deep tremor rippled through the floor. Alarms erupted across the corridor, their shrill wail cutting through. The tension like a blade. Containment surge, Kale muttered, already sprinting back toward the control bay. Zara was right behind him, her armor glowing with a sudden, fierce intensity. By the time they reached the primary access chamber, the displays were awash with warning signals. The quantum harmonics on the containment field were spiking beyond anything they'd seen before. The plasma sphere within the reactor pulsed erratically, its glow flickering like a wild, angry heart. This isn't random, Zara said, her voice sharp now. Look at the resonance frequencies, they're too uniform. Kale's fingers flew across the console, pulling up deeper diagnostic scans. His eyes widened as he processed the data. These fluctuations, they're being driven from outside the system. Something's interfering with the reactor from beyond the station. Zara's armor flashed in sharp, rippling patterns as she analyzed the energy flow. Another reactor, she said grimly, or multiple reactors, all operating in harmonic resonance with ours. If this is deliberate, her voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Someone or something was tampering with their systems on a galactic scale. If those harmonics aligned in just the wrong way, it wouldn't just destabilize Kepler. 7. It could cause a chain reaction across every connected energy grid in 3 star systems. Kale's pulse quickened as he looked up at her. If this cascades, we're looking at power failures, reactor meltdowns, and maybe millions dead. Zara's gaze hardened, her armor pulsing with steady determination. Then we don't let it cascade. Before he could stop her, she moved toward the reactor access port. Her armor flared in a soft, dangerous light, preparing for deep interface. Zara, wait, he said, grabbing her arm. The heat of her armor burned faintly against his skin, and for a moment, he forgot the alarms. You said the last interface nearly killed you, he said, his voice raw. You can't just, she turned to him, her face calm but fierce. Kale, this is what I do. This is why I'm here. You can monitor, you can support, but you can't stop me. Her armor shifted again, and for a moment, it flashed a deep crimson red. The sight sent a jolt of fear through him. Why is it red? What does that mean? She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It means you should stay away. But he didn't. He stepped closer. Not a chance. The silence after the alarms died down was almost worse than the chaos itself. The reactor's hum had lowered to a deceptive calm, like a predator crouching in the dark, waiting. Kale stood near the control bay, his pulse still pounding from the last surge. His eyes were locked on Zara, who was running diagnostics through her armor's neural link, the glowing lines across her chest plate pulsing like living veins. He could still see the trace of red in her armor, faint now, but not gone. You didn't answer me, he said, his voice quiet but sharp. Why does it glow like that? What's happening to you when it turns red? Zara didn't look at him. Her gaze stayed on the fluctuating energy graphs displayed across the reactor's transparent interface screen. "It's just strain," she said, echoing the same evasive explanation she had given before. "My armor reacts when the energy flow exceeds safe thresholds. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Kale's voice rose. "Zara, I've watched you risk your life a dozen times already. Don't you dare stand there and tell me a crimson warning glow is nothing more." Finally, she turned, her eyes sharp, silver with faint blue rings meeting his. There was no anger in her expression, only a quiet sadness. "You think I don't know the risks? I'm Zephrian. I was trained for this since childhood. We don't have the luxury of pretending this work is safe. Our armor is designed to channel energy in ways that human physiology can't survive. Every interface shapes time off my life. It's the cost of my profession." Her calm tone only made it worse. Kale felt like someone had reached inside his chest and squeezed his lungs. "You talk like that's normal," he said, his throat tight. "Like your life doesn't matter." She gave a faint, tired smile, and the glow of her armor softened for a moment as if reflecting her mood. "One life for millions. That's the equation we've lived with for centuries. You know as well as I do that if this reactor fails, 3 star systems go dark. Hospitals, water stations, life support grids, all of it ends. If my work prevents that, then yes, it's worth it." Kale stepped closer, unable to hide the storm in his voice. "It's not worth you." Her expression flickered. He saw something behind her calm exterior, a flash of surprise, maybe even vulnerability. Before she could respond, the reactor chamber groaned, a low vibration running through the station. Like the growl of something waking, Kale's console lit up with new data. The quantum resonance readings had changed. The interference pattern was no longer sporadic but rhythmic, pulsing in sync with the reactor's heartbeat. His fingers raced over the controls, pulling up the harmonic graph. "This isn't random." "Instability," he said, his tone shifting from frustration to alarm. "These fluctuations, they're being driven. Look at this. These spikes are too clean, too coordinated." Zara turned to the screens, her armor's lines rippling as she integrated with the data. "It's external," she said after a moment. "Another energy source, or several, creating harmonic resonance with ours." Kale felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders like lead. "If it's external, that means someone is." "Deliberately, or accidentally," Zara interrupted, though her voice didn't sound convinced, "tampering with the energy network. But if these harmonics line up at the wrong frequencies—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "We're talking chain reaction," Kale said, the realization hitting him like a cold wave. "Not just here. Every fusion plant in range could destabilize." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the pulse of the reactor. Zara's armor flickered again blue at first, then with a faint red line like a warning vein glowing beneath its surface. "Kale," she said softly, "if this pattern continues, I'll have to manually interface again. There's no other way to suppress this level of harmonic interference before it cascades." "No," Kale said instantly, his voice firm. "You're already at your limit. I can see it, even if you won't admit it. We need another solution, anything but you plugging yourself into the core like you're disposable." Zara stepped closer, her hand brushing the side of his console. The armor gave off a faint hum where it touched the surface. "You don't understand. The systems I control aren't mathematical, they're alive. They respond to intuition, to energy flow, to touch. Your instruments calculate reactions after they happen. My interface prevents them, and if the feedback fries your neural link—" Kale shot back. "What then? Who saves you?" His voice cracked on the last word, and it startled him as much as it did her. Zara's gaze softened. For a moment, fierce determination in her silver eyes gave way to something warmer. "I don't expect anyone to save me," she whispered. "I don't do this for recognition or survival. I do it because someone has to." Kale looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, he realized how much weight she carried behind her calm, almost otherworldly demeanor. She wasn't fearless, she was simply too used to standing on the edge of oblivion to flinch anymore. "You can't keep doing this alone," he said, his tone quieter now but no less intense. "Because if you die in that chamber, Zara, it won't just be millions who lose something. It'll be me." For a second, she said nothing. Her armor glowed faintly, the pattern slowing as if reflecting her hesitation. "You don't mean that," she murmured. "I do," Kale said. "I mean every word." The reactor chose that moment to shudder violently. Red alarm screamed across every screen, drowning out the moment of quiet vulnerability between them. Zara's expression hardened instantly, her training snapping back like a shield. "Kale, we don't have time for this," she said, moving toward the access chamber. Her armor flared brighter with every step. "The resonance is spiking. If I don't stabilize it now, we lose everything." Kale followed, his heart pounding. "Then I'm going with you." "You can't," she said firmly, not even looking back. "The levels inside the interface zone would kill you before you even touch the console. Then I'll stay close enough to pull you out if anything happens." Kale shot back. She paused at the chamber threshold, her armor glowing crimson for a heartbeat, like a living warning. "If it turns red again," she said quietly, "you stay away, promise me." He met her gaze, every muscle in his body taut. "I can't promise that." Zara stared at him for a long moment, the silence between them alive with everything they couldn't say. Then she turned away and stepped into the reactor chamber, the door sealing behind her with a heavy hiss. Through the observation window, Kale watched as her armor's glow intensified, merging with the reactor's furious light. It was beautiful and terrifying. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wouldn't end without someone paying the price. The reactor bay was silent except for the steady, pulsing thrum of the containment field, a sound that felt less like machinery and more like a heartbeat on the verge of cardiac arrest. Kale Chen stood at the main console, his eyes locked on, the cascading warning streaming across the displays. The containment harmonics were climbing toward a critical threshold. Red arcs flared on the graph like jagged lightning bolts. One wrong fluctuation and the plasma core would breach its magnetic cage, and the energy that powered 3 star systems would become a weapon of mass annihilation. Zara stood just beyond the barrier that separated the control deck from the reactor chamber. Her armor glimmered with a radiant, pulsating blue, flowing like liquid light across her form. Yet beneath that serene glow, Kale saw something darker, tiny pulses of crimson threading through the patterns like veins of fire. He had learned by now that red meant danger. Red meant pain. Red meant she was pushing her biomechanical interface beyond its designed limit. "This can't hold for much longer," Kale muttered, running diagnostics for the 5th time. "The harmonics are cascading faster than predicted. If we don't bring them under control in the next 2 hours, we're looking at a catastrophic field collapse." "I know," Zara said softly, her voice carrying through the coms with that musical Zephrian lilt that made even dire warnings sound like a song. She stepped closer to the reactor interface, her hand hovering above the access panel. "That's why I'm going in." Kale turned sharply, his breath catching. "No, absolutely not. The last time you interfaced with the core, your armor was seconds away from a full neural cascade. Another surge like that could—" He stopped himself, the thought too sharp to say aloud. "Kill me?" Zara finished, glancing at him with eyes that glowed faintly like molten silver. "You don't need to say it, Kale. I know the risks." "Then stop pretending they don't matter." The words burst from him with a force he didn't intend. His voice echoed off the metallic walls, the sound mingling with the low growl of the reactor. You can't keep acting like your life is just a number in the equation. I won't let you do this alone. For a moment, Zara didn't move. Her armor pulsed faintly, shifting between hues of blue and violet as if reflecting her hesitation. When she spoke, her tone was quieter, but heavier. This isn't about numbers. It's about survival for billions. If I don't intervene, the Kepler network collapses. Hospitals go dark. Starships lose their life support. Do you understand what that means? Kale stepped closer, his fists clenched at his sides. I understand what it means if you don't come back. And I'm telling. You, I can't. He stopped, his breath trembling, and when he spoke again, the words were quieter but no less raw. I can't watch you burn yourself out. Not again. Not when you matter this much to me. Zara's bioluminescent patterns flickered, a ripple of color across her armor, almost like a heartbeat syncing with his words. Kale, she began. But there was something unsteady in her voice now. Something that didn't sound like the uncheckable Zephrian specialist who had saved this station more times than he could count. She looked at him, really looked, and the silence between them was heavier than the reactor's hum. You mean that? I mean, Kale said, his voice breaking through his restraint, that I don't care if this reactor melts down, if the stars burn, if the whole damn council screams at me, because the thought of losing you scares me more than all of it combined. I love you, Zara. I think I have for a while now, and I'm done pretending I don't. The words hung between them like a live current, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The reactor lights pulsed against the walls, and Zara's armor flared brighter, her patterns rippling with emotions she didn't bother to hide. She stepped closer, the faint hum of her armor resonating with the low throb of the station, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that cut through everything else. I was afraid you'd say that. Why? Kale asked, his voice raw. Because it means I have something to lose, she whispered. Her gaze lingered on him, and the softness in her tone was almost painful to hear. And I can't promise I'll come back from this. Kale shook his head, his heart hammering. Then we find another way. We figure it out together. There is no other way, Zara said, stepping past him. Her armor began to shift, its bioluminescent waves condensing into tight, pulsing lines. Manual interface is the only chance we have. I'll stabilize the harmonics from inside the cores field. I can do this. Not without me, Kale said, moving to block her path. You said yourself that human tech is precise. Let me rig a buffer field to bleed off some of the feedback. If you go in there alone, that armor won't last 20 minutes. Zara hesitated. Kale, you're not built for this. That field will fry you alive. Maybe, he said, his tone steady despite the tremor in his hands. But I'd rather risk that than stand here while you go in alone. The alarm klaxon screamed suddenly, cutting through their argument. The reactor core flared, its plasma sphere surging with unstable light, casting wild shadows across the bay. Zara looked at the readings and swore in her native Zephrian tongue. A sound like a broken melody. We're out of time. Her armor flared bright crimson, the living patterns snapping into jagged lines. Kale's breath caught at the sight. What does that mean? It means, Zara said, turning toward him, her voice trembling with both fear and resolve, that if you stay close, it will kill you. Then I guess I'm not listening, Kale said, stepping up beside her. Not this time. Zara's expression broke for a moment, her armor flickering between red and gold as if torn between fear and something deeper. She reached out, her gloved hand brushing his, and in that fleeting touch there was more meaning than either of them could. Speak aloud. Then the chamber doors slid open. the light of the core blazing like a second sun, and they both stepped forward into the storm. The chamber swallowed them like the throat of a dying star. The moment Kale and Zara stepped into the reactor bay, the energy in the air changed. The plasma core throbbed at the center of the containment field, a furious sphere of light that pulsed in jagged rhythms as though it were alive and angry. Every hum of the magnetic coils vibrated through the floor, resonating in Kale's bones. The temperature wasn't oppressive, but the sensation of standing next to something that could vaporize them both in less than a second made the air feel razor thin. Zara was already different. The moment the blast doors sealed behind them, her armor's patterns flared to life, lines of light rippling across her body like molten rivers. Kale had seen her interface before, but never like this. The glow was sharp, jagged, almost wild, her living suit straining against the reactors. Unstable harmonics. Every step she took closer to the containment field made his heart pound harder. It wasn't just the danger. It was her, moving with this terrifying grace, as though she belonged in this inferno while he was only a trespasser. "Kale," she said without turning. Her voice carried through the comlink, layered with the faint harmonic undertones of her armor syncing with the field. "I need you to set up the buffer nodes. We'll have one shot at this." Kale swallowed, nodding even, though she wasn't looking. He sprinted to the emergency case along the far wall, yanking out portable emitters. They were crude, nothing like her elegant Zephrian interface, but they would bleed some of the harmonic energy away from her armor at least. That was the plan. The reactor's hum suddenly spiked, a violent surge of energy slamming through the containment coils. Lights across the chamber flickered. One of Kale's consoles hissed as a fuse blew. He glanced up, his breath catching when he saw her. Zara stood with one hand against the containment wall, her armor's glow flaring white-hot, her body framed in the light of the raging plasma sphere. She looked both inhuman and heartbreakingly vulnerable, as though every breath was a battle against the forces she was commanding. Red veins of light slashed across her armor, crawling up her chest and arms like living fire. "Your armor," Kale said, his voice tight as he adjusted the first emitter. "It's already glowing red." "I told you what that means," she said softly, her voice trembling beneath the harmonics. "Stay away." He froze, his hands gripping the emitter, torn between obeying her and every instinct screaming that leaving her alone would be worse. "If I stay back, you'll burn yourself out," he said, his tone raw with frustration. "I won't let that happen, not while I can still move." "Kale," her voice cut off as another surge rippled through the reactor. The light slammed outward, a tidal wave of energy that rattled every panel in the bay. The emitters he had just placed flickered dangerously. "The interference is climbing. I'm taking too much feedback. The neural pathways can't." "Then let me take some of it," he said, snapping the last emitter into place and forcing his portable generator to max output. He crossed the chamber, ignoring the wave of heat and static that slammed into his unprotected body. "I'll use the aim field to bleed off the excess. It's insane, but it's better than watching you die." Zara turned to him, her silver eyes wide, her armor's glow painting her features in both fury and fear. "No, human physiology can't survive direct contact with this field. Even with your emitters, the energy will fry your nerves in minutes." Kale met her gaze and forced a grin he didn't feel. "Then we make those minutes count." There was no time for her to argue. He moved to the control scaffold beside her, his emitters locking into place. The moment he activated the buffer field, a violent wave of energy slammed into him, like being hit by lightning and drowned in molten metal all at once. His vision blurred and his knees nearly buckled, but the harmonics on Zara's armor stabilized just a fraction, but enough. Her red flares dulled to deep orange. "Kale," she said sharply, her voice breaking through the static in his ears. "You're going to die if you keep this up." "Then we finish before I do," he gasped, forcing the words out past the pain. "What do you need me to do?" Zara hesitated for a fraction of a second, her glowing hands pressing against the containment field as she focused. "Hold your position. If you move, the feedback loops will spike. I can stabilize the reactor with your field counteracting the resonance, but it will take time." "Time we don't have," Kale muttered, watching the reactor's core pulse violently. "How long?" 30 minutes, she said. He almost laughed. The pain tearing through his body made every second feel like a lifetime. "I'll give you 15, he said, teeth gritted. "Make it work." For the next agonizing stretch, Kale held the buffer field steady, every nerve screaming as quantum energy coursed through him. His vision narrowed to Zara, her fluid. Almost dance-like movements, the glow of her armor shifting as she pushed herself harder. She looked like a goddess of energy and fire, commanding a force that no machine could control. Halfway through, she turned, her face etched with both determination and fear. "Kale," she said, her voice trembling, "why would you do this? Why risk everything like this?" He looked at her, sweat dripping from his forehead, his breath ragged. "Because I'd rather burn with you than live without you." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. Her armor's glow rippled, shifting into patterns of light he'd never seen warm, soft, alive with something deeper than any reactor pulse. "You're a fool," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A beautiful, impossible fool." "Then, let's be fools together," he said, and the reactor roared around them as they fought side by side, holding the storm at bay. The air inside the reactor chamber felt electric, thick with the weight of invisible currents. Kale Chen's body trembled as the quantum field tore through his makeshift buffer. Every muscle burned, every breath was like inhaling fire. His skin prickled as though it was dissolving at the edges, yet he held firm, refusing to break position. Across from him, Zara was a blazing silhouette, her armor glowing like a living star, its deep red lines flashing violently against the soft blues and silvers of her core patterns. The reactor thrummed like a living creature, each pulse shaking the chamber with the fury of an angry heart. Containment was unstable, teetering on the brink of collapse. If either of them faltered now, it wouldn't just be their lives, it would be millions across 3-star systems. The plasma core rippled inside its magnetic prison, wild arcs of light stretching like claws against the invisible barrier. "Kale." Zara's voice, layered with the strange harmonics of her armor's neural link, cut through the roar of energy. "Your vitals are spiking beyond safe levels. You need to disengage now before your nervous system." "Not happening," Kale shouted, though his voice cracked under the strain. His hands gripped the portable emitter's frame so hard he felt the metal biting into his palms. "You're not facing this alone. We're finishing this together." Zara's armor pulsed in patterns that flickered between warning and disbelief. Her bioluminescent patterns were erratic now, no longer the graceful waves he had grown used to, but frantic, jagged surges that mirrored her rising panic. She could feel his pain literally. Her neural interface picked up the violent fluctuations of the field, and his human biology, so unprotected, was an open wound in the storm. "You'll die if you stay in the feedback zone," she said, her voice trembling despite the strength of her stance. "Do you think that's what I want? For you to throw yourself into the fire just because I have no choice?" Kale gritted his teeth, his vision blurring as sweat stung his eyes. "You've been risking yourself every single day for this station," he rasped. "For everyone. I won't stand here and watch you burn alone, Zara. Not when I—" He stopped himself, the words almost lost to the overwhelming hum of the core. But this time, he didn't hold them back. "Not when I love you." The admission hit her harder than any surge of feedback. For a heartbeat, she froze, her mind torn between the deadly focus the reactor demanded and the sudden rush of something far more dangerous. Her armor flared violently in response, its glow shifting in wild, chaotic patterns as though mirroring the storm of emotions she couldn't suppress. "Kale," she said softly, the single word laced with both wonder and fear. "You can't." "Say that now. Why not?" His lips curled into a pained smile even as his knees threatened to buckle. "If I don't say it now, I might never get the chance." Zara closed her eyes for half a second, drawing in a breath that seemed to ripple through the neural threads of her armor. When she opened them, her gaze locked onto his, luminous and fierce. "Then hear me, Kale Chen. I love you too. And if we survive this, I'm never letting you put yourself this close to the fire again." Before he could answer, the reactor shrieked a sound like metal screaming underwater. The plasma core surged, a wave of unstable energy slamming against the magnetic field. The chamber floor shook violently. Warning sirens erupted, painting the walls in strobing crimson light. "Containment breach imminent," the automated system blared. Estimated time to failure, 12 minutes. Zara's armor surged with renewed power as she extended her hands toward the core. "I'm locking the primary containment nodes," she said, her voice returning to its sharp, professional tone. "Hold your field steady. I'll need every drop of time you can buy me." Kale adjusted the emitters, pushing them beyond their design thresholds. Sparks leapt from the control panel as the portable generator groaned. The energy tearing through him grew worse, searing his nerves like molten fire. But when he looked at Zara, he saw something extraordinary. She wasn't just controlling the reactor. She was becoming part of it. The streams of light from the plasma core intertwined with the glowing filaments of her armor, wrapping around her like living vines of power. It was terrifying and beautiful all at once. "How much longer?" Kale demanded, his voice hoarse. 25 minutes for full stabilization," she answered, not looking away from the core. "I don't have 25, he said, grimacing as a fresh wave of energy jolted through him. 10, maybe 15 if I'm lucky." Her focus flickered toward him for the briefest moment, and he caught the flash of fear in her eyes. "Then I'll finish in 15, she said fiercely, "even if it kills me." The minutes that followed stretched into eternity. Kale's breath came in ragged gasps as the field threatened to tear his body apart. Every nerve screamed, every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Yet he refused to step back, not while Zara's form glowed brighter, her armor locked in a battle of willpower and raw energy. Her bioluminescent veins pulsed like a living map of the storm she was taming. When his legs finally gave out, he fell to one knee, but his hands never left the emitter controls. "Zara," he croaked, "tell me you're close." "Almost there," she said, her voice carrying both exhaustion and determination. "Primary containment, 80% stabilized." "That's good," Kale muttered through gritted teeth, "because I think I'm down to 3 more minutes." The field around Zara rippled violently, her armor flashing crimson again as she pushed herself beyond every safety threshold. "You don't quit on me now, Kale Chen. You hold that line. I'm not losing you after this." Something in her tone cut through the haze of pain and gave him a surge of strength he didn't know he had. He forced himself upright, biting back a cry as another wave of energy ripped through him. "Then hurry, because I'm not planning on leaving you either." And then, in the middle of chaos and pain, there was a sudden shift. The plasma sphere calmed, its violent pulses smoothing into rhythmic waves. The alarms dimmed, their shriek replaced by the low hum of stabilized energy. Kale's monitor blinked green across several nodes. "Containment restored," Zara breathed, her voice trembling with relief. "We did it." Kale smiled weakly, his body finally giving in as the last of his strength drained. "Told you, 15 minutes. He collapsed against the side rail, the emitters whining as they powered down. Zara ripped herself free from the core interface, her armor dimming as she rushed to his side. She caught him before he hit the floor, her hands glowing faintly as her armor scanned his vitals. "You're burning up with radiation," she said, fear lacing her voice. "You've taken too much." "No human could." She stopped, shaking her head. "Don't you dare die." "On me, Kale. Not now." He tried to smile, his vision fading. "Hey, I thought I told you. I'm not going anywhere." Zara lowered him gently to the floor, her armor pulsing with frantic patterns as she activated its emergency healing functions. She could feel the quantum scars his body had absorbed, his cells fraying under the energy overload. And for the first time, the fearless Zephrian specialist felt something close to terror, not for the reactor, but for the man who had chosen her over his own safety. The hum of the reactor had fallen to a steady, almost tranquil rhythm, but the silence that followed felt anything but peaceful. Zara knelt on the floor of the chamber, cradling Kale against her lap as her armor's glowing veins flickered erratically. His skin was pale, his breath shallow. Every reading scrolling across her HUD told her the same thing Kale Chen had: minutes, maybe less, before the quantum energy tearing through his cells did irreparable damage. "Stay with me," Zara whispered, her hands trembling as they hovered over his chest. The tactile fibers of her armor connected with his skin, searching for stable pathways, scanning for any chance to neutralize the radiation pulsing through him. "You said you wouldn't leave me, so don't you dare make me do this alone." Kale's eyes fluttered open, hazy and unfocused, but he managed a faint smile. "You know, I don't listen very well," he murmured, voice raw from the strain. "Especially when someone tells me to stay away." A sharp laugh escaped Zara, half joy and half despair. "Idiot," she said, her voice breaking. "The most reckless, stubborn idiot I've ever met. Guess we're even," he whispered. His hand lifted weakly, brushing against her armored shoulder. "Because you are the most remarkable person I've ever known." The words hit her like a pulse of energy stronger than any reactor surge. Her chest tightened, her throat aching as the realization slammed into her. She couldn't lose him. Not now. Not after he had risked everything for her. "I'm not letting you die," she said, her voice steel. "Even if I have to burn out every circuit in my armor to keep you alive." The decision came without hesitation. Her armor's healing subroutines weren't designed for human biology, but she could force a manual override. A dangerous idea. A stupid one by Zephrian standards. Neural backlash, system overload, and permanent damage to her own nervous system were all guaranteed. But none of that mattered. If Kale had been willing to stand inside a quantum field to save her, she would push herself even further. "Zara," he whispered as he watched her armor flare with dangerous intensity. "What are you doing?" "Saving you," she replied, her voice hardening. "You're mine now, Kale Chen. You don't get to die without my permission." She focused, forcing the living circuitry of her armor to sync with his body's broken rhythms. Her mind merged with the quantum field of his damaged cells, guiding the bioelectric waves to dismantle the radiation poisoning layer by layer. The pain was immediate and brutal. She gasped as the feedback ripped through her like fire in her veins. Her vision swam, her breath shallow, but she didn't stop. Minutes dragged like hours. Kale tried to protest, but his voice was too weak, and his mind was slipping into darkness. All he could feel was her touch, the hum of her armor, and the strange sensation of warmth spreading through him, like a lifeline tethering him to the world. "Don't quit on me," Zara whispered, her voice hoarse. "We survived the storm together. You don't leave me now." Kale's breathing stabilized slowly, the raw pain in his body dulling. His vision sharpened, focusing on the pale blue glow of her face above him. She looked exhausted, strands of hair damp against her forehead, the once brilliant shine of her armor now dimmed to a dull, flickering pulse. "Zara," he croaked, reaching up to touch her cheek. "You're burning yourself out." "I told you," she said softly, leaning into his hand for just a moment. "I'd rather burn with you than let you go." Her healing efforts pushed the last traces of radiation from his system, but the toll was obvious. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled, and Kale barely managed to catch her. "Easy," he said, his voice still weak but steadier now. "You've done enough?" Zara managed a tired smile. "Enough to keep you alive. That's all that matters." The chamber's alarm shifted from urgent red to a calm blue. The reactor had stabilized fully, this time. The data scrolling across Kale's instruments confirmed it. The harmonic interference was gone. They had done it. Somehow, through sheer determination and stubbornness, they had saved not just the reactor, but millions of lives across 3 star systems. But neither of them cared about the readings in that moment. Kale's arm wrapped around her as they sat there, leaning on each other, 2 people who had faced the impossible and survived. "You scared the hell out of me," he said, his voice raw. "Watching you in that field, I thought I'd lose." "You." Zara tilted her head against his shoulder, her eyes closing briefly. "You scare me too, Kale. You're reckless, impulsive, and—" She paused, opening her eyes to look at him, her lips curling into the faintest smile. "You have the biggest heart I've ever seen." Kale laughed softly, though it came out like a sigh of relief. "So we're both idiots." "Maybe," she said, her voice tender now, "but at least we're idiots together." The medics arrived soon after, rushing into the chamber with emergency kits, but neither Kale nor Zara moved immediately. They stayed close, letting the moment sink in, the weight of survival and the quiet pulse of something far stronger than fear-love forged in fire. Weeks later, after the station had fully recovered, the 2 of them stood side by side on the reactor platform once again, this time during a routine check. The danger had passed, the new safety protocols implemented, but the memory of that night still lingered like a scar neither of them wanted to forget. "Do you remember what I said?" Kale asked, his voice low. "That you love me?" Zara replied, her armor glowing softly in shades of gold and blue. "Yes, I remember." "Good," he said, smiling, "because I'm going to keep saying it every chance I get." Zara's lips curved into a soft, rare smile as she reached for his hand. "And I'll keep reminding you that love like this comes with occupational hazards." He chuckled, squeezing her fingers. "Then I'll take every single hazard. As long as it means standing here with you." The reactor thrummed quietly in the background, but it no longer felt like a threat. It was just the heartbeat of a station that had almost broken and the heartbeat of something stronger between them. For once, the universe felt calm. And as they walked out of the reactor bay together, Zara glanced over her shoulder at the glowing core. "Next time my armor turns red," she said, her voice warm but teasing, "are you still going to ignore me?" Kale grinned, leaning closer. "Always."